In this podcast episode, Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, discusses the province's unique position as an energy-rich jurisdiction where the battle between anti-human green environmentalism and industries promoting cheap, accessible energy is being fought. Alberta's situation has international repercussions, as evidenced by recent requests from Germany and Japan for liquid natural gas, which were turned down by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Smith characterizes Trudeau as the face of top-down globalist utopians who would harm the poor in their counterproductive attempts to save the planet. The conversation begins with a discussion of Bill C-59, which Smith describes as reminiscent of American policymaking, where unrelated items are added to must-pass legislation. This bill, ostensibly about budget implementation, includes provisions making it illegal for the energy sector to discuss their positive environmental record unless conforming to undefined international standards. Smith expresses concern that this will lead to frivolous lawsuits and prevent the industry from focusing on creating prosperity and developing resources. She argues this move is detrimental to Canada, Alberta, and the world, as it hinders their ability to be reliable energy providers to trade partners. Smith questions the constitutionality of Bill C-59, noting that it infringes on freedom of speech. She criticizes the Liberal government as the most illiberal in Canadian history, trampling on foundational freedoms enshrined in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. She outlines her government's plan to challenge the bill constitutionally and through the Charter, expressing frustration at the federal government's tactic of implementing harmful policies that take years to overturn in court. The discussion turns to the underlying motivations driving these policies. Smith traces the roots of the environmental movement back to the 1960s and 1970s, citing influences like the Club of Rome and Paul Ehrlich's population bomb. She argues that despite evidence to the contrary, proponents of these ideas persist in promoting a flawed premise of resource scarcity. She suggests that Trudeau's vision for Canada's relevance on the international stage is misguided, focusing on aggressive environmental policies rather than practical matters like meeting defense spending commitments or managing immigration effectively. Jordan Peterson introduces the idea that the fossil fuel industry may have taken the wrong approach in addressing environmental concerns. He argues that by focusing on emission reductions, they've inadvertently given credence to the idea of a carbon dioxide crisis. He presents data suggesting that increased carbon dioxide levels have actually been beneficial, citing NASA reports of increased global greening and improved crop yields. He contends that the industry should shift to a more offensive stance, highlighting the positive impacts of their activities rather than being apologetic. Smith discusses the economic consequences of environmental policies, particularly on energy prices and affordability. She points out the contradictions in countries like Germany, where aggressive green policies have led to increased reliance on more polluting energy sources like lignite coal. The conversation touches on the broader societal impacts, including the potential for these policies to exacerbate poverty and hinder global development. The discussion shifts to the conservative movement's vision and messaging. Peterson suggests that conservatives have struggled to appeal to young people due to their focus on what not to do rather than offering an inspiring vision. He proposes framing responsibility as an adventure, linking it to the idea of living a meaningful life. Smith agrees, emphasizing the need for conservatives to promote values that support human flourishing, such as the importance of family, community, and productive work. The conversation delves into family policy and social issues. Both Peterson and Smith stress the importance of promoting stable family structures for societal well-being. They discuss the challenges of addressing these topics in a way that's inclusive while still advocating for what they see as optimal family arrangements. Smith notes the growing acceptance within conservative circles of a broader definition of family, including same-sex couples who share similar values of bonding, monogamy, and creating a nurturing environment for children. Smith expresses concern about the mental health crisis among young people, attributing it partly to a spiritual malaise and disconnection from traditional sources of meaning. She argues that conservatism can offer a path to reconnection, by promoting long-term bonds, family, and community involvement. Peterson adds that the left's messaging, while appealing to young people's desire for meaning, often leads to despair and irresponsible hedonism. Smith highlights Alberta's recent economic success, particularly in attracting new residents. She reports that over 200,000 people moved to Alberta in 2023, drawn by affordable housing, lower taxes, and the opportunity to raise families. She frames this influx as a positive challenge, preferring to address the issues of growth rather than manage decline. The conversation touches on the broader political landscape in Canada, with Smith noting the prevalence of conservative premiers across the country. She expresses hope that this trend at the subnational level might eventually influence federal politics, particularly in light of recent conservative victories in traditionally liberal strongholds like Toronto. Smith addresses Alberta's policies regarding gender identity and healthcare for transgender youth. She explains the rationale behind restricting certain medical interventions for individuals under 15, emphasizing the importance of allowing young people to reach a level of maturity where they can understand the long-term consequences of their decisions. She frames this policy as a compassionate approach aimed at protecting children's future options, particularly regarding fertility and the ability to have children of their own. The conversation concludes with a discussion of energy policy and its role in global development. Smith argues for the importance of providing affordable energy to developing nations as a means of alleviating poverty and improving living standards. She criticizes the approach of extreme environmentalists, suggesting that their policies often harm the very people they claim to want to help. Smith advocates for a balanced approach that considers both environmental concerns and the need for economic development. In closing, Peterson commends Smith for her leadership in Alberta, particularly in addressing controversial issues like gender-affirming care for youth. He notes that Alberta's policies align with emerging international trends and scientific evidence. Smith reiterates her commitment to making Alberta a model for the rest of Canada, expressing optimism about the province's future and its potential role in shaping national policy. Throughout the conversation, both Peterson and Smith emphasize the need for a more nuanced, pragmatic approach to environmental and social issues. They argue for policies that balance economic prosperity with environmental stewardship and that prioritize human flourishing over ideological purity.